So for the final video, I just want to talk about how the whole process of weathering and like erosion and deposition are not some like isolated experience that's meant only for science. This is a very long like process that happens over millions of years. It's not going to happen quickly, but it happens literally everywhere that you can think of in nature. So literally every rock outside is being experienced by weathering somehow, in some way, shape, or form. And so there are about a million examples I can think of off the top of my head of just weathering in general. So for example, caves are like a really good example of weathering because they were just initially large like rocks that were hollowed out over millions and millions of years to form what they are now. So any cave you can think of is a good example of weathering. You know, large cracks in rocks, obviously we talked about frost weathering, like the ice weathering basically. And beaches, obviously I talked about beaches last video. And islands actually a very good example because initially they could just millions of years ago, they were probably not even there. And weathering caused by, you know, water currents brought up all those like dirt and sand into one area and formed their own new island. I can't think of any specific examples, but that is definitely a thing that happens. So it's a good thing to think about as an example. Oh, also one more thing I'll talk about is tectonic plates. So basically what those are, millions of years ago when the earth was just one big rock and we only had one continent called Pangea. Pangea, look it up. It's like pretty interesting, you know, how the earth was initially just one big continent that split off into those smaller continents. And so that was caused by what's called tectonic plates. And basically those that initial big continent, Pangea, broke off and formed their own smaller countries because of weathering. The weathering broke down the connection between the plates and they split off from each other over a process of millions and millions of years. And so even like now, even like modern countries, islands, huge nations were all naturally formed because of weathering. So literally anything you can think of is being weathered some way or shape or form. And even now, in modern day, you can see some examples of nations that are experiencing weathering. For example, I know California and Florida are rumored, hypothesized to eventually break off from the US because of the plates under them. And basically when I'm talking about the plates, I'm talking about how on the top level, you know, we have the soil, the dirt, the rock, right? But underneath the water, what's really going on there? And basically what's happening is, so basically the entire Earth's crust, or like the land that we live on right now, is basically composed of like 15 different plates. Basically every single like continent or like large country or island is being held up on the Earth's crust by a layer of rock about a few hundred miles deep, basically. And like basically there's nothing separating them, right? And so when they float around in the ocean, they're bunching up against each other and they're creating friction against each other. And we talked about friction in the second video, where it's another form of weathering. And so yeah, it's also another good form of weathering to think about. They're causing friction against each other, bunching up against each other, and they're eventually, one's going to break apart and one's going to go loose and go flying off somewhere. And that's what's happening in both California and Florida today. So it's a good thing to think about. Yeah, that's the only thing I really think about that's like a good example. So have a good day, guys.